Imagine waking up tomorrow, walking into your local store, and finding everything cost 25% more. The toys for your kids, the medicines for your parents, and even the gadgets you love. This is not a nightmare. This is not inflation. This is a trade war. And like every war, the common people like you and me are caught in the crossfire.
There are growing fears of a major global trade war tonight after President Trump announced sweeping tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China.
I always say tariffs is the most beautiful word to me in the dictionary.
And China is striking back.
We are firmly opposed to this unwarranted increase. Let me also emphasize that there is no winner in a trade war.
He asked how long we could put the tariffs on hold, and I told him, let's put them on hold permanently.
We need to be able to deal with the unpredictability of President Trump, and meanwhile, we need to stand strong and send a clear message that Canadians will fight back, and that's what we'll do.
But this is not the first time that the US is aggressively putting tariffs on other countries. They did something similar about 100 years ago. In 1930, America was struggling through the Great Depression. Then, two senators, Reed Smoot and Willis Hawley, proposed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, imposing huge taxes on over 20,000 imported goods. The idea was to protect American farmers and factories by making foreign goods more expensive. So if an imported product costs more, people are more likely to buy the domestic products, right? That was the theory. But the result was not so simple. Other countries retaliated. They slapped their own tariffs on American goods. And as a result, global trade slowed down. People lost jobs and prices went up. It's like blocking your neighbor's driveway, then your neighbors block your driveway, and soon nobody can leave home without a hassle. And back then, people were already suffering. Adding more taxes on top of that on imports did not help at all. Many historians believe that it made the Great Depression even worse. It did not help farmers as much as planned because other countries stopped buying American wheat and other crops. Factories saw a dip in sales because fewer countries could afford their goods. It created a cycle of pain. But why am I bringing this up now? Because that is what's happening right now. History might be repeating parts of that story. Trade tensions are back. The US has put tariffs on China, Mexico, Canada, and other places in recent years. And now, when Trump is back, this time he has applied even more tariffs on top of that. And of course, these countries respond with their own tariffs. It's a cycle you have seen on the news. Trump announces a tariff, China fights back, then the European Union debates new taxes on American tech, and they keep passing the ball from one president to another. But this channel is about the science of products. So today, we'll explore how all these tariffs will affect the products you buy and love, how it will affect the countries, and how it will affect you and your wallet. But before that, let's answer the basic question. What exactly is a tariff? See, many people might think that US is putting all these tariffs on China and other countries. It means that Chinese companies has to pay some kind of taxes. But that's not the case. Tariff is basically a tax on an imported product. When a product from abroad comes into your country, the governments add a fee. Companies that import the item have to pay that fee. And often, they pass that cost on to you, the consumer, in the form of higher prices. Let's say you want to buy a smartphone. Without tariffs, that phone might cost $100. But then, the government adds a 25% tariff. Now the same phone costs $125. Why? Because someone has to pay that extra tax. And usually, it's us, the consumers. And tariffs are not new. They are as old as trade itself. They're even older than income tax. They've existed in one form or another from centuries. Kings and queens used tariffs to fill their treasure chests. Later, new governments used them to protect local businesses or raise money for projects. For a long time in history, tariffs were used as a way to control the supply of goods. They were used to protect the tariffs were a main source of income for the governments because there was no income tax. Governments relied on import taxes to run the country. But here's the thing, tariffs might have made sense hundreds of years ago when economies were local and countries needed to protect their industries from being wiped out. But today, in a global economy, we don't just buy products from our own country. We buy the best products regardless of where they come from. You should have the right to buy the best smartphone, the best car, the best medicine at the best price. And tariffs interfere with that choice. Instead of creating stronger businesses, tariffs often make local products more expensive and less competitive. Governments might think that they are protecting their industries, but in reality, they are just making products more expensive for you. And history has shown this again and again. Take cars for example. In the 1970s and 80s, American car companies like Ford, GM, and Chrysler were struggling. Their cars were big, fuel-hungry, and often unreliable. Then came the 1973 oil crisis, and gas prices shot up. And suddenly, American cars were not just expensive to buy, they were expensive to drive. Meanwhile, Japanese automakers like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan offered smaller, fuel-efficient, and more reliable cars at a lower price. And American consumers loved them. And by the 80s, Japanese cars were everywhere in the US. And instead of competing with better design and technology, the US government decided to protect local automakers using tariff and restrictions. In 1981, the US forced Japan to voluntarily limit the number of cars they could export to America. This was called a voluntary export restraint, or VER. And of course, when US makes these sanctions on anyone, they are never voluntary. It was a diplomatic trade restriction. And to further protect local automakers, the US imposed tariffs on imported trucks and other vehicles, making them more expensive for American buyers. But did this all help US automakers? Not really. Instead, Japanese companies found a way around the tariffs. And by the 90s, Japanese cars dominated the US markets anyway. Despite the tariffs, American consumers still choose them because they were better and more affordable. So far, we have seen how history repeats itself. Tariffs have been used again and again to protect local products, and they have failed again and again to save them. But the real question is, who actually wins and who loses when tariffs are applied? Because while one country might think they're protecting their economy, tariffs don't just affect one side. They create a chain reaction that impacts both the sides, the country that applies the tariff and the country that receives them. Let's look at it one by one. The country that applies the tariffs usually has some short-term gain with some long-term pain. When a country imposes tariffs on imports, the goal is to protect local industries. At least that's what they say, with a hidden political agenda behind it. The idea is that foreign products will become more expensive, so people will go for the local alternatives. Domestic companies will get a boost because they don't have to compete with cheaper imports, and more jobs would be created in local industries, at least temporarily. But here's where it gets messy. Other countries don't just accept tariffs, they fight back with their own tariffs. If the US puts tariffs on China, China puts tariffs back on American products in return. This hurts American exporters who now struggle to sell products abroad. Farmers, manufacturers, tech companies, they lose international customers. And secondly, there comes a local price rise for everyone. If companies rely on imported materials like steel, chips, or textiles, their production costs go up, and they pass that cost to you, consumers. We'll get to that part later. But even companies that are not directly involved in global trade feel the impact because everything gets more expensive. And finally, inefficiency creeps in. When businesses are protected by tariffs, they have less incentive to improve. In the long run, protected industries can become weaker because they don't have to compete with the best in the world. This is exactly what happened to US automakers in the 80s. Instead of innovating, they relied on tariffs and still lost to Japan. So while tariffs can provide short-term relief, in the long run, they make industries weaker, hurt exporters, and drive the prices up. Now let's talk about the countries who are on the other side of this war, that get hit with the tariff. What happens when a major economy like the US or the EU suddenly slaps higher taxes on another country's imports? First of all, retaliation kicks in. No country just sits back and takes tariffs. They don't want to look weak. So, they respond. If the US puts tariffs on Chinese tech, China slaps tariffs on American agriculture. If the EU taxes American steel, the US taxes European cars. It's a back and forth battle, and trade war accelerates very fast. Then local industries look for new markets. If China can't sell as many products to the US, it looks to India, Europe, or Africa instead. If American farmers lose Chinese buyers, they try to sell to Mexico or South America. So countries shift their trade alliances. But this takes some time and money, and a lot of diplomacy. And then inflation kicks in. If a country relies on exports like China or Germany and suddenly can't sell as much, their economy slows down. Governments sometimes devalue their currency to make the products cheaper for foreign buyers, but this can lead to inflation, making daily life more expensive for their own people. And finally, companies start moving production overseas. Like if producing goods in China becomes too expensive, companies move factories to Vietnam, India, or Mexico. That's why many tech companies shifted production outside of China after the tariffs of 2018. The same thing happened with Japanese car makers in the 80s. They built factories inside the US, hiring American workers and avoiding tariffs. They entered into new markets of luxury and introduced brands like Lexus and Acura because the lower volume means they have to increase the profits by selling higher-end models. At the end, when tariffs keep escalating, it does not just affect two countries, it disrupts the entire global supply chain. If China and the US are in trade war, companies worldwide will feel the impact. If steel tariffs go up in one country, construction prices rise everywhere. If one country puts tariffs on semiconductors, the entire tech industry slows down. The world is too interconnected for tariffs to truly benefit any country for the long term. And this brings us back to you and me, the consumer. Because whether we realize it or not, we are the one paying the price for this trade war. We are the ones who walk into a store and see a higher price. It doesn't matter if tariff is on steel, electronics, or farm goods. At the end of this chain, you and I pay the bill. Imagine you want to buy a car that's made in another country. If tariffs go up on its parts, the car's final cost shoots up. You either pay more or you don't buy it. Some people switch to a local brand, but that local brand might also use imported parts, so their prices also might go up. And now you have fewer choices or higher cost. Same goes for everyday items, clothes, groceries, or your kid's bike. Even if you don't notice it right away, your wallet will feel it over time. Secondly, the jobs are on the line. Let's say you are an employee in a factory that exports products. Your job can be at risk if the factories are shifted overseas. And if you are a small business owner that relies on cheaper imports to stay competitive, you might have to buy local products which usually come at high prices. And to compensate that, you might have to raise prices of your product or service, which might scare away customers. And finally, our choices might shrink. If there are more taxes and duties on some foreign products, it might happen that they will slowly fade away from the market. And then we have to pay more for a local product despite of having a low quality. Like we have seen with the example of cars in the United States in the 80s. So if tariff hurts the regular people of both the countries, why do countries and politicians keep using them? Of course, the first reason is politics and power. When a leader goes up on the stage and says that we're putting our country first, it sounds very strong. Voters who see factories closing might cheer for tariffs. It's a quick political win. But the true cost shows up later when prices rise up and trade partners retaliate. And the second reason the most leaders shout is that it will protect local industries. They say tariffs shield the local businesses from cheaper imports. But we already discussed, that's not sustainable in the long run. It might look like they are saving the jobs, but in reality, it often delays real solutions like innovation and efficiency. And the third reason that many governments give for tariffs is the national security, and nobody can go against that, right? Leaders claim that they need tariffs to protect strategic industries like steel for defense or advanced tech. Sometimes that's valid, other times it's just an excuse to shield certain companies from foreign competition or just to protect some big corporation or lobby groups. But you might ask, what can we do about it? On a personal level, it's very hard to change a national policy. But you can stay informed. Follow the news on trade policies. Understand how tariffs work. Watch videos like these. And when you vote, consider the impact of trade policies. Choose leaders who weigh both short-term and long-term effects. Maybe you can be a bit more flexible with your brand loyalties. If certain imports become too expensive, explore some alternatives. Maybe there is a local brand that's still affordable or a used product that avoids tariffs cost. And if you're in business, you might explore local supply chains or diversify your suppliers to reduce tariff risks. Never keep all the eggs in one basket kind of thing. The truth is, trade wars are complex battles with no real winners. Just like the Smoot-Hawley Act a century ago showed us, when countries build economic walls, everyone ends up paying the price. In our connected world, we're all links in a global chain. When one link breaks, the whole chain feels it. Whether you are a farmer in Africa, a factory worker in China, or a tech developer in California, trade wars impact your life. History keeps teaching us the same lesson. Cooperation builds prosperity, and isolation leads to decline. Because at the end of the day, trade is not just about products crossing borders. It's about ideas, innovation, and progress. It's about giving people the freedom to choose the best products at the best price, regardless of where they come from. So the next time you hear about new tariffs or trade wars, remember, the real cost is not just in dollars and rupees. It's in the opportunities lost, the innovation delayed, and the progress slowed. The world works better when we create great products together. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to watch more videos about the science behind the products. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.